really important. Concentric is we're an analytics software platform used by enterprises to drive revenue. And what they're using it for is to kind of close the gap between what the business plans are doing and what what the results are saying. And I think Pierre identified three things that we say in the very same way. What are we delivering? Risk mitigation, speed and pertinence, and early detection. And the notion of prescriptive analytics inside the supply chain is to understand the interdependencies from the market, and the market for us includes what our companies are doing and what competitors are doing, modeling that out so that the downstream demand forecasting and supply chains can gain resilience, anticipate issues, and we mostly do this through the notion of a digital twin. So I'm going to just walk you through kind of the concept of what how we define our role in the supply chain, and then give you a couple of use cases, and hopefully that'll start a few questions that we can discuss. Over the last couple hundred years, we've gotten smarter and smarter, and you see a lot of information about BI, you see a lot about machine learning, but matching those two circles of supply and demand very tightly still remains elusive at times, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. You can't, look into the industry and not believe that everybody is increasing their forecasting capabilities with new tools, AI and ML. I did have to clarify that EDM is not electronic dance music, it is enterprise data management. But what we've gotten really good at is looking back, finding patterns in the data and making new predictions. So what we're proposing as a new tool in the supply chain to augment what people are doing is to go one step further beyond the sales team, sometimes beyond the customer, and look at the entire market and build an understanding of market dynamics, right? To understand what the competitors are doing, the external shocks like COVID or regulation or taxes, economy, so that you can see the demand dynamics and model those at the same time that you're modeling out how you're actually going to fulfill that demand, and bringing those two together. And the technique we're using is market simulation, and it produces a very dynamic view of demand and market share, how market share shifts will occur. And so our platform is really much designed around the human in the loop, starting with the domain expertise of what you know about supply, demand, competitive forces, building a model of a market that shows not only what your company's doing in terms of marketing and pricing and messaging, but also what all the competitors are doing as well. Constantly validating that with sales data and answering what if questions as things emerge, as announcements come. And this is back to Pierre's point about speed and pertinence and early detection, so that the whipsaw of the market changes flow into demand planning earlier in the cycle, so that the balance can be achieved more quickly. So what is market simulation? It's really a process that creates a mathematical twin of a competitive market. We often point to appliances and getting some sensibility of how many brands are in a category, what attributes drive purchase, what segments are we targeting, and really adding into the demand forecast, the demand planning, a demand forecast driven on market activities. And that's not limited just to marketing, it's pricing and in stores and salespeople and communication. So you get a very broad view of what's happening. And I just want to talk about how do you define a market and what do you put into it. And I think the thing that you first think about in terms of market simulation is it a choice between two or more alternatives? What are the alternatives that people are seeking? And you define what we call a competitive framework. And then what you're able to model is, what data and research do you have to create your customer profiles? Are there multiple segments? Are there heavy users, light users? And building some representation of how they behave. Additionally, what you want to be able to do is kind of delineate the customer journey. What do they touch? Do they go in store? Do they call a call center? Does a salesperson come and greet them in a B2B environment? and also get some sensibility of how word of mouth is influencing perception. So even before we start looking at what retailers are doing or what our distributors are doing or the marketing, we're trying to get a sense of the network of interdependencies that drive choice. And then, of course, what we want to do is layer in the marketing effects, product pricing, new products, events, anything that touches the consumer perception, and get a sense about how the marketing plans of all of the participants in the industry will change the forecast. So once you have that in hand, you have this planning device. It's an enterprise platform. It's being updated generally every week with new information, new forecast accuracies, new attribution reports that say what was the causal results of what we saw. And then you get an ability to do what if scenario planning. What if a PR crisis comes? What happens if dynamics in the market through competitors or new entrants or different changes we make to our plan will change the forecast, and what people are able to do on kind of a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, whatever the tempo of the business needs to be, is to change the unit forecast, right? Because while we're focused as a company on revenue, revenue decomposes into how many units you're going to ship. And for each time period, you can look at any one of those different scenarios, a PR crisis that may reduce sales, but then maybe a competitor changes price, maybe we improve our service, maybe we adjust our spend, and we get a forward forecast weeks, months, sometimes years in advance that allow us to organize the supply chain in the most efficient process available. So that's the generalized concept of what people are doing to augment the demand planning and that they have to get to this kind of market-driven unit forecast. So I thought I'd just give us a couple of use cases and talk through how people went about it and the things that they had to overcome as a process to get to some good answers. So one of the first things that, and the most common use case of simulation is what we would call sales forecasting. So as you can imagine, as people moved into their homes, especially across the U.S. and other parts of the world, home trends change. People started saying, "Hey, I need to fix up my house. Oh, I need to improve my washer and dryer." And oftentimes what happened was the supply chain wasn't prepared, right? It could have been in toilet paper, it could have been in appliances. And the use of the system was to go one step further, to move past kind of the typical supply and demand planning and build these market simulations in concert with the retailer's activities. So what was the retailer going to be advertising? How much floor space were they going to be allocating to the products of the brands we were serving? And how did that forecast at a very specific retailer level move back up the supply chain so that given a shortage of parts and electronics, how best to allocate inventory? And in fact, could we reduce buffer inventory so that you would maximize the production available and the margins and the market share that you wanted to capture? And so by having this detailed planning that looked at each competitor and what each competitor was doing in the marketplace, they were able to cut their total inventory down, reallocate it to some, and the company we work with has had 4 quarters in a row of increasing sales and earnings per share because they were able to balance the inventory to the most productive channels of distribution. Another way to think about demand planning and market simulation is if you're launching a new product. So a company we were serving was using the platform to launch a new topical analgesic. It was just a way to alleviate pain after working out. They had been selling this product in the professional channel, which was chiropractors, licensed massage therapists, physical therapists, and now wanted to move to the consumer market. And what they wanted to be able to do is they said in the US, there's 11 top retailers. How many of those should we sell to meet our production targets, but without cannibalizing our existing business. So as they started to model out each retailer, and they were going to each retailer and saying, okay, what were the campaign, what in cap are you going to give us? What in-store signage? How are you going to promote it? What price are you having? And they built these detailed plans and started looking at particular retailers and the commitment they're willing to take. I think they used the notion of demand planning as a little bit of leverage on how to, we're only going to give it to a few retailers to get better deals. And what happened was they were able to go to just 7 of the top 11 retailers and hit their sales target for your first year sales, and not put undue burdens on the manufacturing or the sales teams or the marketing teams to deliver it. So there's all these knock-on effects. I think, Pierre, I use the word again, interdependencies, that if you have a clear demand signal all the way down to the end user, whether it's consumer or customer in a B2B environment, there's so many things that can be organized for more efficient delivery and cost savings and productivity. It drives a totally different approach to how we think about demand planning. Another way of looking at demand planning at a store level, this was a case that was done with a candy company. They had maybe 6 in-store programs each year. In-store programs meaning, they would have different setups or different promotions. They sold through 11 different channels. They had different campaigns. They have a different store sets. They might have 4 or 5 different locations in a store somewhere near checkout, or for impulse buys or part of the candy section. And it became unwieldy and unmanageable. And so what they did is they said, okay, let's go in and do the what if scenarios by looking for the simplest solution we as a brand can manage, and roll that back into the what if planner to say, is there some medium between what we're doing today and what we're wanting to do to make our business more efficient and drive sales? And what happened was they dropped most of the campaigns. They went into just one type of campaign, which was college sports. They reduced their in-store programs by 2, so they just ended up with 3 different tiers, and they minimized the differentiation between each of the different retailers. So what were they able to achieve, right? They reduced their total stock keeping units 7%. They were in stock 8% more, full 8 basis points higher, and they achieved a 2.3% sales increase over the plan. So I think the general conversation or general view that we have toward this approach is really thinking about prescriptive analytics augmenting current tools, right? With a consumer-centric or end-user view of the market, where your supply and demand tools that might look back historically have machine learning, AI tools that are giving you better fit of what you have historically, matching that up with the upstream activities around the market and integrating those 3 into a planning dynamic that says, look, we understand the size of the market. We now want to understand market share and how we're likely to achieve what we're shooting for in those environments. And so that's the nature of prescriptive analytics. It says, here's our baseline. How do we reach it? And how can we bring all those different pieces together? So that's my 20 minutes and 16 minutes.